Good morning. I'm Wes Bergen. This is the first of two videos in preparation for the Narrative Lectionary, Advent 2, Esther. In order to understand Esther and Mary and the parallels between them, you first need to know the Esther story. I was really hoping to send you to a different video, some YouTube video that explains the story of Esther, and I looked at a bunch of them, but I couldn't find one that told the story well that helped you make parallels between Esther and Mary. So I'm just going to do this way. Sorry about that. Obviously, the best thing to do is to read the book for yourself. The most important bits are really in the first couple of chapters, but the whole story is quite interesting, so that's obviously the simplest. But even then, it's helpful to have some basic historical background to the book of Esther. Last week, we left the story with the prophet Habakkuk, who's predicting the coming of the Babylonians. And they did. They came. The Babylonians came, and they conquered all of that region and much beyond it. And they sent a significant part of the Israelite leadership off to exile in Babylon, which is in modern Iraq, right? So long walk. And all of this took place roughly around 587 BCE. That's the general number that scholars use. So about 50 years later, the Babylonians were conquered by the Persians under Cyrus the Great. And he also allowed conquered people to return to their homelands, right? The Babylonians often took the leadership from all over the place, right, and brought them into Babylon. The Persians said, you guys can go home again, right? So the Jewish community, which is quite a large community in Babylon, was allowed to return to Jerusalem. And they did so in a series of successive waves, although most of them chose to stay in Babylon. Right? This is historically important in all of this. Now, apparently, some of the Jewish people also ended up in Susa, which is in modern Iran, one of the capitals of the Persian Empire, right? So if you've got a map in your head and you're thinking about Babylon, Jerusalem is one direction, Susa is in the opposite direction. So how or why they ended up there, we have no idea. But Susa is the place where the story of Esther takes place. Now, it's quite possible that our story of Esther might be more fable than fact, but it's still historically likely that there was a Jewish community in Susa in order for the story to be sufficiently plausible to be maintained, to be used, right? So the fancy word here is verisimilitude. The less fancy word is truthy. The story has to be truthy in order for people to keep telling it over the years. Now, the story of Esther then reflects a dispersed Jewish community with pockets of Jews living in various places throughout the Persian Empire. And so we know that there were significant Jewish populations in Babylon, and then in Egypt, and in Israel, and in many other places throughout the world. So Esther tells one story from the perspective of a widely scattered Jewish community living under Persian rule in various parts of the world and attempting to maintain a distinct cultural and religious identity under those conditions. It is also, interestingly, the only book in the Bible that does not mention God. At least that is true in the Hebrew version of the story, the one reflected in most English translations. When the story was translated into Greek, however, a few centuries before Jesus, God was added into the story all over the place. So historically, we get a glimpse into a community that is both comfortable and uncomfortable, describing their world and themselves in largely secular ways. I'm also going to produce a brief video on the parallels between Esther and Mary, so I'm going to link to that in the chat below. Hope this was helpful and informative. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.